Dogs are biologically more, let's say, well endowed than their cat counterparts, so suck on that, cat people. Wait, actually, please do not. This video is actually about Pokemon, not about genitalia of dogs, even though it does cover that, so if you're into that, we cater for all markets here. In truth, this is about the caniforms of the Pokemon world. Caniforms are essentially dogs and dog-like animals. If we give these actual names, they're called canines and Arctoids. If you haven't seen the last video, we covered their counterpart, the feliforms, or cat-like animals. This is actually the penultimate part of this series, as it's the final real-life animals that we have in the world. So, one of the main differences between caniforma and feliforma is actually in their nose. Caniforms typically have much longer snouts, which makes sense as dogs are very well known for their sense of smell. Alongside this, caniforms typically don't have retractable claws, which a lot of feliforms do. This makes them much more terrestrial and much less arboreal. Most cats can live in trees, but it's really only bears that are the only caniforms that can live in trees. There's even changes in mentalities. Most caniforms are pack hunters. Dogs are well known for being incredibly loyal, whereas how are cats often portrayed? Evil and scheming. Cats are much more often solo predators. Finally, as I mentioned before, there is a certain bone in caniforms' bodies which is typically larger. Let's just leave it at that. So, let's get on with it. As I mentioned earlier, caniforms split into two groups. The Arctoids come first. This is where we find the animals that are dog-like, but aren't really dogs. The first of these are the bears, which Pokemon has 5 of them. 2 of these bears I would classify as panda bears. Pangoro is cut and dry. I mean, he's a panda bear. But I also think maybe Snorlax is a panda bear. First of all, there's how it looks. There aren't many green and yellow bears in real life, but what do we know about panda bears? They're big, they have 2 colors on them, kind of like Snorlax. They're also well known for being very, very lazy. Like, that's a trait that we see a lot. Look at Kung Fu Panda. He's known for being lazy. Or Po, if we're being respectful, his name isn't Kung Fu Panda. But traits that we see of panda bears is that they are lazy, they eat a lot, they are a bit of a doofus. And I would say Snorlax has all of these traits. They're also incredibly rare. Spoilers for Kung Fu Panda. I think it's Kung Fu Panda 3, but Po is the only one until that movie. And panda bears in real life, I don't want to go back onto the topic of genitalia, but you have to kind of get them in the mood in order to repopulate. Like, that's how rare these guys are. There are entire teams whose entire jobs are get this guy going. And now you all have to think about that. The other bears are the more traditional bears. This is where we find Ursaluna, who is a brown bear. These can often be found in Hokkaido, which is what Sinnoh is based, or Hisui is based off. We also have Urshifu, who could either be a North American black bear or a Asian black bear, but just based off the fact that Game Freak is an Asian company and most of the Pokemon are Asian inspired, including Urshifu, he's probably an Asian black bear. In this group, we also have Beartic, who is one of my favorite Pokemon. I love the design of Beartic, but I hate the concept of Beartic. You know, Game Freak took the most apex of the apex predators. Like, you see a polar bear, you're pretty much already dead. These guys are like killing machines. And Game Freak gave him Beartic stats. I mean, Beartic should have like 500 attack or something like that, because these guys are like monsters. Beartic just needs a massive buff in the way that Ursaring got one. It got a brand new evolution, and that Pokemon is busted. In fact, Beartic is the only one of these 3 bears that isn't an incredibly good Pokemon. It needs a new evolution. Give it like a ice and water type in and make it more aquatic, you know? Or make it more in theme with that. It's the apex predator. Give it like a dark type and make it more savage. Back to the chart. I'm getting sidetracked there. After this, we have Pinnipeds. And Pinnipeds are one of the most unique groups of mammals because they have developed things like flippers and blubber. What's so unique about this is that they're actually a type of convergent evolution in real life. Look at the cetacea, which is the whales and dolphins. They have also evolved in this way, even though they've taken it maybe a bit more to the extreme. We also have the Sirenia, which is what Dugong is. Dugong is not a pinniped. It's part of this Sirenia group, which is all the way back up here. These 2 animals are really similar, but so distantly related, and that's what convergent evolution looks like in real life. Interestingly enough, Sirenia actually comes from the word siren, based off the myth that kind of beautiful ladies would sing and lure sailors onto the rocks and kill them. Primarina is not a part of the Sirenia, but it is based off this concept. Primarina is actually a sea lion, not a seal. We can see that in how its lower body bends. Most seals cannot do this, hence why seals normally have to scoot along on their bellies. This actually means that there are no specific, fully evolved seal Pokemon. Spheal and Celio evolve into Walrein, who is clearly a walrus, and Seal evolves into Dugong, who is a dugong. And it's also weird how anybody could look at a real life dugong and think, you know, that's a bit of me. It's a very provocative episode today, isn't it? The next group that we have are called Musteloids, and they're not called Mustelids. That's a subgroup of the Musteloids. For some reason, scientists have this weird tradition of they name a larger group something and then they will name the smaller group a very, very similar word, so it can get very confusing. Within the Musteloids, we do have a group called the Mustelids, but first I need to talk about the skunks and red pandas of the world. Pokemon's skunk is obviously Skuntank, and I love the design of Skuntank. He gets a lot of hate, but he's one of my favorite designed Pokemon. In terms of red panda representation, I'd say that Pokemon has 2 of them. Spinder is very clearly a red panda, but I'd also include Beware in this group. Beware is a tough Pokemon to categorize, because one, is it a stuffed animal? You know, could we say that Beware is close to Ampharos or Dubwool? You know, it's made of this, it's probably got a similar kind of texture to those animals. You know, they're the wool producing animals of the world. It's a stuffed animal. Maybe we include it there. In terms of what type of bear it is, I'd say that its stripy tail and general look indicates that it's some sort of red panda, even though it isn't red. But not all red pandas are red, they're more of a brownish color anyway. While we're on the subject of Spinder desperately needs an evolution. It's absolutely terrible. It has 16 every stat. I think that the funniest way to do this would be to give it 120 in each stat. You know, that's Arceus level of Pokemon. But it's always confused at all times, because Spinder's whole thing is that it's always turning, so instead of having a 360 base stat total, give it a 720, but it's just so dizzy all the time that it's just confused. It would never be used, because that's stupid. Maybe if you use it with like a wheezing or something to get rid of its ability, but I just think it would be so funny to just give Spinder a massively powerful evolution and then just make it confused. It would be the most Game Freak thing to do. So moving on to this, we have the true Mustelids of the Pokemon world. Before I talk about these specifically, I want to talk about a few biological terms which we can use to describe things on this chart. Monophyletic, paraphyletic, and polyphyletic. I'm not 100% sure on the pronunciation on those. If we describe something as being monophyletic, this is a group that includes their common ancestor and all of its descendants. For example, the term primate is monophyletic. It includes the earliest known primate and everything else that has descended from this. If you know anything about prefixes, you can probably guess what paraphyletic means then. It means that it's a common ancestor and some of its descendants. So for example, the term reptile. This term includes the earliest common ancestor of all of the reptiles, but doesn't include all of the descendants, namely the birds. This is a group that is split off and is not included in the definition of reptile. Polyphyletic is a group that does not include a common ancestor. For example, warm-blooded. Both mammals and birds are warm-blooded, but not everything between them and the common ancestor are warm-blooded. In this case, the reptiles. Hope that clears anything up. Another example of a polyphyletic group is the term badger. There's no particular animal called the badger, it's just a group of similar animals that we have grouped together. They're not necessarily the closest relatives to each other, but they are similar. So in this case, Typhlosion is a honey badger. I'd say its colours definitely give this away. Again, not because it's green and yellow, but more just the way that its colours are laid out. It might be a porcupine, but I'd say honey badger just because of how it looks. It looks so much like a honey badger, I don't think you can deny it. Linoon represents much more of the North American type of badger, whereas Obstagoon and Galarian Linoon, to me, represent the more traditional badger because I'm from the UK. I love the design of the Galarian Linoon and Obstagoon family because it's such a unique take. Not only have they taken an animal associated with the region, but they've also taken cultural changes into account, creating a similar animal that is so unique to its region. The next group after this is Weasels, which is a catch-all term. It includes stoats, sometimes called ermines, such as Mian Shao. If you don't know what a stoat is, imagine Queen Elizabeth I. You probably imagine her with some white and black spotted headpiece. Well, each of those spots is one stoat. Weasels also include ferrets, which is obviously what furret is, and obviously Weavile is in this group. It's specifically based on the Kamatachi, hence why it has those scythe-like claws. The final group of Musteloids are otters. Floatzel and Samurott are the only two otters in the Pokemon world. I had originally considered that maybe Samurott was some sort of pinniped, but judging by the fact of how it stands up a lot, and these definitely look a lot more like arms than flippers, I'd say it's much more an otter. Going back up to the canine animals, we first start off with the foxes of the Pokemon world. Delphox is clearly a North African phoenix fox, having the very distinct head shape of this animal. Zoroark is probably also a fox, even though it has some werewolf traits to it. However, Ninetales and Thievul are definitely foxes. I don't want to sound like a Galar fanboy, but I also love Thievul's design. In fact, its pre-evolution is amazing as well. If you're not from the UK, the word nick just means to steal, so the idea of the first evolution being called Nickit is so good. And I love how it evolves from a simple robber into a gentleman thief. It's such an amazing take because foxes are always presented as this kind of sly, charming, but very cunning animal, and the idea of the gentleman thief, mask and all, is so perfect for Thievul. I've actually left out a Pokemon on purpose here, Alakazam, and that is because I have no idea. I cannot place Alakazam at all. He has stumped me. I originally thought of it as some sort of weasel-like creature, like a weasel or a ferret, particularly with its big mustache, but then I looked into it and a lot of things said it was a fox. I thought, yeah, a fox sounds pretty good. But then a lot of people also said it's a goat. I can't decide. All three of them are good, and it's too much to pick between any of them. If you've got this far, please tell me what you think Alakazam is, because this guy's confusing. we definitely know what Lucario is. It's a jackal because it's based on Anubis. After this, we get the wolves of the Pokemon world. Lycanroc is a werewolf, so it makes sense that he would go here, even though maybe some of its evolutions are a bit more humanoid, but they're definitely canine in how they originated from. Manectric could be a lion. I mean, it has a mane, but it definitely feels more dog-like, and I associate it a lot with the move Howl, which is definitely a wolf thing and not a cat thing. I've also included Zacian and Zamazenta here. I've generally strayed away from including box art legendaries on this chart, mainly because a lot of them are gods. These two just seem like strong wolves, you know? They don't have the kind of grandiose that a Kyogre has, or Groudon as the shaper of the worlds. These were just like guys who beat a big alien, you know? After this, we have the actual true dogs. So if you were coming in this video wanting to know what the dog doing, they're over here. And I'm not going to go through all of them because some of them are pretty obvious, you know. Okidogi is the kind of doge dog. Smeargle is a beagle. Furfrou is a poodle. Dashmon is a dachshund. Slurpuff is a confusing Pokemon. I think that it's some sort of hyper-engineered dog. You know, like a pug or a bulldog. You know, the ones that really breathe hard. Because Slurpuff has that kind of vibe to it. And it's also very dog-like. I don't think I'm going too far out of the way to say that Slurpuff is a dog. Entei, on the other hand, might be a lion. And that would make sense because all of the other legendary beasts are some sort of cat. But I think that Entei is one of those really big dogs, you know, like a St. Bernard or a Newfoundland. Has such a look to it that he definitely would be part of this group. So those were all of the dog and dog-like animals in the Pokemon world. If you think I missed any, please let me know. If you have an opinion on the Alakazam, even if you don't, please just let me know. It's for the engagement. And if you got this far, please consider liking and subscribing. So this is the last video that covers real life animals in terms of Pokemon. I'll be covering the sprite-like Pokemon and the ghosts and some of the gods and even some of the Pokemon that are not from this world. I'm also planning on remaking some of the earlier videos because they're not very good. Bye.